Hey guys, good evening, good evening. Hopefully, we have a little better luck tonight than we did in nights prior. We've been going through the ringer here a little bit. So, you guys noticed the thumbnail. It's alive. Dave and Kim's Chevelle is running and it drove off the lift. That's an awesome thing. Um, let's see if everything's working tonight. All right, so yeah, okay, so that's showing us on, so we're good there, and hopefully the sound's on. So hopefully everything's good, and hopefully I've got the music off today. So I apologize. Last week was a real cluster. So um, Ryan says, "Good evening, working good." All right, cool. Yeah, so uh, last week. You guys were putting stuff up on the chat, and after the fourth comment, which I think was you, Ryan, when you logged in, that was the last chat that I saw all night. So you guys were putting information up on there, and I never saw it. I don't know if you guys got confirmation, but I did go to the comments section and answer or comment on what you guys had put in the chat. So hopefully that worked. We'll see. We'll see how it works tonight. So far, YouTube Studio says it's in excellent condition, although it looks like it's still stopping every second. I don't know. I ran a system log test on the software, and it showed that it should be a good connection, but it looks like it's okay. So hopefully that all works. Yeah, Ryan, appreciate that. It was bad. But that's the whole thing with the stuff. You never know what we got going on between Xfinity doing the uploads and what's going between the software that I'm using for the live show and then what YouTube is putting out. It's hard to keep up with all this stuff. We've had a pretty good run there for a while, no issues, and then the last couple times it's been bad. So, but yeah, so being got back in the shop this last week, was able to get the shop clean and got to work on Dave's car, Dave and Kim's car, whatever you want to call it. Actually, I think it's more Kim's than anybody else's. But I just going down punch out list, trying to get everything all set up, get it to the body shop so they can get the finalized stuff down. Yeah, it did. Yeah, Ryan, you're right. It did look like everybody hung in there. I appreciate it. Hey, Chris, how you doing? So far, chat's working. Hopefully, the stream stays working and stuff. Well, yeah, I really appreciate everybody. I mean, you guys are hardcore. I love it. That we still had a good amount of people that stayed on the show. Had a lot of people bouncing in and out like normal, but a good number stayed. So that was really cool. But yeah, so I'm getting really close on the Chevelle. We got it running. All the fluids are topped off. Was able to drive it in and out of the shop. We got the brake split, obviously. Trying to get a couple things straightened out on the fuel injection. I got to set up a couple things in the Dakota Digital for like the gear shifter position and stuff like that. It's the only reason why the dash isn't back in the car yet. And I'm missing a couple AC vent hoses. So that's all supposed to be here by Thursday. And I'm going to get it loaded up and taken down to the body shop, and they can get that thing done. They got some small paint work to do. Dave's still on the fence about what he wants to do with the drip rails. he's bought a ton of different trim, stainless trim for the drip rails, and nobody can seem to get it to go on the car without bending up. I don't know if anybody knows any tricks. I almost think there should be like a tool that you could put them on and then re-crimp it once it gets on the machine, kind of like a can opener or something. I don't know. It seems like that's always an issue, trying to get the drip rails back on after paint and body. But we'll see what happens. Dave's even had the thought of maybe having somebody do spray chrome on it, so we'll see how that all works out. But yeah, so we got that just about wrapped up, and then it'll go to the trim shop. It's got a couple of pieces. Got to get the headliner and the rear sail panels and stuff taken care of, and then we can get the rest of the interior in, and then I'll be able to do the my test drive. I like to put about 100 miles on them, make sure that everything operates the way it's supposed to. Do system test on all the components and make sure everything's working and stuff, and we'll go from there. So that'll be pretty cool. You guys that are local or not local, but on the live shows all the time. My buddy Rick is on here from Pennsylvania. He's working on his 55. I saw he posted the other day. He's got all the wiring harness components in, so he's getting ready to do his wiring harness. So hopefully he'll be able to use some of the information that we did on the show. And I did tell him, feel free to give me a shout. Chris says he's all good. He drove the car and no leaks. Yeah, awesome. We did have a discussion this weekend about oil leaks, and Chris has been trying to make sure everything's all solved on it before he gets the new drive assembly put on and gets the final tune on it. But man, the car is getting really close to being ready to do full street action and get back to the track and stuff like that. So glad to hear it, Chris. You put in a lot of hard work. There's Rick. Yeah, he's going to rewatch some of the shows. Yeah, so I've been trying to put titles on some of them so that you can kind of find the ones that we were talking about. I need to set some time apart. Maybe during the Thanksgiving break, I'm going to try to edit a couple videos I've got. I try to do a wiring video on Dave's car, Dave and Kim's, and see if I've got enough data on that, enough information that we can do that. But yeah, so that was pretty good. And Joe brought his Camaro back. He wants me to get the energy suspension motor mounts out and put rubber ones in. He's been mentioning he's got a very small coolant leak on the car. I'm searching for that. I already had it system pressure tested at 25 psi, and I never saw it. So maybe it's a hot cold issue or something. But he just dropped the car today, so we'll work on that this coming up week. And I got a couple of things to touch up, and he wants me to go ahead and hook up the e-brakes. We didn't do that last time. He wasn't sure if he wanted it or not, but now he decided he wants the e-brake in. I need to do a little touch up on the tuning. I noticed when I downloaded the tune, there was a section that the learning kind of went nuts on. So get some work on that and get that thing all ironed out for him. So that'll be good. And update on Cup Car. I finally got a hold of somebody at G-Force South, who is now taking care of all the Tex Racing transmissions, and that dog ring on the fourth gear is bad. So I've got a new one coming, and all I have to do is just separate the case, put a new piece in, put it back together. And I was talking to one of the techs about the shifter modifications that were done. He was aware that a lot of people do make those modifications. And I said, I think I'd like to cut all that off and go back to the standard shifter and the standard linkage. And, he agreed that was probably the smartest thing to do. Don't complicate an easy thing. So we'll go over some of that stuff here in a little bit. And then I got a little tech thing at the end, kind of threw one together. So let's go ahead and show you a little walk around video. When I was filming it, thought it was going to be a couple minutes long. It ends up not being long at all. But let's let me get this stuff set up here. Okay, so shouldn't be any music playing. Let me just, oh, I had it on. So yeah, so there shouldn't be any music playing. So yeah, so there's Dave and Kim's Chevelle out in the driveway. Joe's car, I kind of gotten a little blocked in here, so I had to move some stuff around. But yeah, we was able to drive it off the lift, and brakes worked well. All the power steering seems to be working fine. Transmission, I mean, obviously we just drove it forward out of the shop, so that's kind of hard to see if that's everything. But yeah, so everything seems to be working pretty good. There's a nice ground level picture of it. I think we got the stance real nice on the car. It's looking good. So still waiting on a couple of components to finish the air intake. I really don't want to go to the body shop with without the air intake connected. We don't want any sanding and buffing and all that kind of stuff, dust getting up inside the engine. So we should have all that done by Saturday. So here is a little snippet video I did. All right, Dave's car is running. A little behind schedule, but it's running. Battery's going dead. Everything's good. So let me go off there. So Noah's moving around pretty a lot on this thing. Let me get to a couple of stop spots here. But sounds good. I don't have because the dash is in, I couldn't open the exhaust cutouts. So it's running through the mufflers right now. And you can see we've kind of did a blue theme throughout the entire car. All the dome lights and interior courtesy lights are all in the blue trim, and so Blue Devil, nice. Yeah, you're right, Chris. Yeah, Ryan, I believe the stance is really good. I've been tweaking it all along, just kind of getting a little better all the time. But you see we did some pretty cool things here. You got the low car pedals in there, so nice billet pedals. We got the low car shifter, and Dave found a billet console. So what we did was I twisted the shifter handle a little bit and Dave's going to have the upholstery shop make a boot, so it's going to resemble a stick shift when you look inside the car. Be pretty, different, be pretty cool. But yeah, we got all the blue LEDs in there. I got all the speakers, the stereo is all complete in there now. Speakers in the kick, speakers in the back, some speakers in the dash. We got all the trimming up there on the dash all put in. And I got backlight in the engine bay. We figured with that Sniper dual throttle body intake, a lot of people don't see it, and Dave saw a car in the I think at Meekum or something. They had backlit valve cover lights, and he really liked that. So he asked me, I think I could get that done, and so this is what we came up with. So a little backlight under the on top of the valley tray there to light off the interior engine bay there. I think it worked out real well. And I'm still working on this cowl plate. That still needs a little bit more trimming done, and it's got to be sent out for polishing. So that's just kind of in for mock-up right now. We'll go ahead and pull that back out before it goes to the upholstery shop or to the body shop. But we did a whole thing of billet's got billet hood stops, hood hinges, hood latch, and all that stuff. So it's going to look real good. And as far as the air intake, we're going to go in through the grills. So these high beam positions are actually screens, and they're little velocity stacks built in. And we have air filters that go behind there, and then the pipes that are going to go up into the dual throttle bodies. So I think that's going to look real clean when it's all done. Yeah, when I move the video, it doesn't look, it gets blurry. So yeah, there's kind of a good shot. So you see the fuel rails and stuff real good, and it kind of lights up everything. So thought that'd be pretty cool, especially going to car shows at night. You better illuminate the engine bay. And that's about it, I guess, on that video. You really see anything? So yes, big progress there. Glad to see we're able to get that part. Dave happened to be by the shop when I backed it out of the shop and stuff, so he was pretty pumped that it's running and driving now, or at least moving. Let's not call it driving, but it's definitely moving. He was here Saturday when we did the first startup. It cranked right up. Everything was good there. So that all worked out very well. So we're really close to getting that thing ready to leave. Like I said, Saturday it'll be going, and that'll be good to keep that project moving along. It kind of sat a little bit dormant for a bit, and we're doing a little better now. So that's kind of where I'm at with that, and just give you guys the update on the and I think it goes out so fast. So yeah, so on the Cup car with the dog box transmission, you can see there's the dog ring that attaches to the gears. You can see how nice and square they are. Actually, are even back cut a couple degrees. And there's the third gear one that's back cut, and you can see the fourth gear. It's got a nice roll in it. And I wasn't sure because I've seen some of the drag race ones were done like that on purpose. And in fact, when I was talking to G4 South, the guy did tell me if this was going to be used in a drag car, we could take this dog ring out, flip it over, and it would be on the DXL of third gear, and so it would be perfectly fine for drag racing because on the acceleration side it would stay engaged. But what's going to happen here is in fourth gear, when we lift off the throttle to do some engine braking, it's going to knock it out of gear. So we definitely are going to change that. You can see on the 1-2 dog rings how they're nice and rectangle with a little undercut, so that's the way they're supposed to be. So we're going to get a new piece and go ahead and fix that. So that's that was that, and then we were talking about the shifter. And that's not a real good picture, but you can see that these two levers are way lower than you can actually kind of see some welding on there too. So this rod is supposed to be the same as this one, just in reverse, and then the reverse one is supposed to be hanging down some more. So we're gonna go ahead and cut those off and get this all reset up when I put that dog ring back in there, and we'll get that all squared away and get this thing ready to hit the track sometime. Probably maybe do a autocross in December and get it ready for Sebring for January. So I'll give you guys updates on that as we go. So that's kind of where we're at with that project. So that was good, and we didn't. I was talking, but last week I was going over the wheels on the Vedhawk, but of course with the music playing, I don't know if you could really hear what I was saying. So kind of we'll do a quickie overview on this again. So get that out. There we go. So yeah, so there's the boxes. CCW is now part of Weld, which is part of MW products. So that was interesting when the boxes came with Weld marked on them. They did a very good job wrapping them up. Made a very good way to ship them without getting any damage on them. Nice thing is they are 3-piece wheels, so for future curb damage, we can always replace portions of the rim. That's always a good thing. And that was when I put the wheels on the car just to check the backspace before I mounted tires up on it, and that all came out real nice. And those are the tires we're going to run on it, 315 3018s. 2 of those, thanks to Chris, we got those. Actually, his were the best tread out of all of them that I gathered up. So I went ahead and picked the 4 best and mounted them up, and then we went ahead and mounted them on the car. And I was trying to show here, but the light didn't quite do it justice on the footprint. But there's a good picture of the. And this thing's so touchy, but pretty good wide stance on the with the 315s on there. It all came out real nice the way it sits. The fenders can go over top of the tires without touching. That all worked out very well. And the wheels cleared the ball joints, no problems. That was good. I do have to do a little notching in the frame to get the car to go full lock to lock, because the rim has so much backspace to make it fit the bodywork. But that's not a big deal at all. But all in all, really happy with the way that all turned out. The sizing and everything came out real well. There's a good picture of the footprint. So it's all going to work out real well. So that was just a little overview, since you guys weren't maybe able to hear me talking over the music last week. One other thing we wanted to go ahead and let you guys know, that I do have a wheel fitment tool, and I've got the attachment. It'll do 4, 5, and I believe I got the attachment for 6. And you can go set it up for whatever diameter, whatever width, and then when you're done, you look on the graduation, and it'll tell you what the back spacing is and all that for measuring. So you can set the tool up as I did in this picture, at 11 inches. Then you put your tire on it. You can clamp it to the beads. So now the tire is shaped as it would be if it had a rim. And then you can put this tool on, and then you can move it, slide it back and forth to figure out the backspace you want. And this way you can order the wheels properly. So I do have this tool, and if anybody on the anybody that watches the live shows, or on the channel or anything like that, you guys can borrow that tool anytime. I would get a small deposit from you, but I could ship it to you, and you could test it out, and pick your wheels. As you can see with the wheels, with the wheel fitment that I got off of this tool, I mean, it was spot on. Chris says, what would be the problem when the power steering makes a whining sound when turning the steering wheel? So that's typically air in the system. So what you want to do is jack the front end up and with the engine off, and turn the wheel lock to lock until your arm's sore. But what that's going to do is it's going to push all the air out of the system, and then hopefully once you get that all done and the system is full and all the air, when you look in the reservoir, you don't see any air foaming in there. It's all solid fluid. At that point, you should have it shouldn't make any noise anymore. If it's still making noise and you've done that, there's a couple things you can do. One, you can take your return hose off of the reservoir, put a cap on it, on the reservoir, and then put the return hose with an extension or something like that into a bucket, and then start the car and then pour fresh fluid in while you're purging the old fluid out until you see new fluid coming out of the reservoir. Then quickly shut the car off and connect it and see if that flushing the system gets the noise out. But what it is, in the power steering pump, it's a rotary valve. So you've got a round bore, and then you have a round hub that's offset inside that bore with blades. And so as it turns, the blades try to match the bore, so it goes in and out, and that's a pump, just like a G rotor pump or an oil pump, and even a lot of fuel pumps are that way. So a couple things can happen that can cause the whine in the power steering. One is air. Yeah, Chris, I mean, it won't measure that, but you can take the tool and try to pass the caliper, and then you can, off of that, you could kind of figure out how much farther out the caliper sticks. You could also put spacers behind or wheel spacers behind the flange, and then make the tool clear the caliper, read the offset, the backspace on the tool, and then subtract your then subtract the distance of your spacer, and that would put you back to the correct backspace, and the spacer would tell you how much caliper space you would need for it. So it's a little difficult, but it can be done easily. It just sounds difficult the way I described it. That wasn't probably the best way of describing it, but yes, you could measure caliper clearance also with it. But so just say you need 1.5 inches of clearance for your caliper. So you could put 1.5 inch spacer on the hub, then bolt the tool on, make your wheel fitment where you want. When you read the scale down here for your backspace, you would have to add in that 1.5 inches for the caliper, for the wheel spacer, and then you would know that you need 1.5 inches clearance for your caliper, but your wheel space, your backspace would be the number off of that, minus the 1.5 or inch or whatever space you would need to clear your caliper. So that would be, you kind of would need a handful of spacers to do that, but that can be done. That would be a way of doing it. So Yeah, so that worked out real well. And like I said, I do have that tool if anybody needs to borrow one to figure out their wheels. Not a problem. I had a guy that I'm doing some work with in Oregon, and he's trying to figure out his engine. He's got some ignition issues, so I'm sending him my MSD ignition system tester. So, you get a deposit to cover the cost of the machine. I'll send it out, and then, you guys are more than able to use the machine rather than buying that. I forget what the wheelwright tool was. Probably 150, 100, 200 bucks, something like that. So, I mean, rather than buying it, might as well just use mine. And same like this guy in Oregon is going to use the ignition tester. It's $300 from MSD. So with a $300 deposit, yeah, I'll send it to you and you can try it out. And then, just send it back. And if it's no damage, then you get your deposit back. So you get to use a piece of equipment instead of having to buy it for a one-time gig. And I do have a fender rolling tool too. Yeah, I do. I offer the same thing for. So, all right, so let me switch screens. Well, let me load up a screen here. And we'll kind of talk about some of the tech stuff I wanted to go over. So, engine condition. There we go. So, I had a customer call me the other day. Excuse me. He's got a Camaro drag car with an SB2 NASCAR engine in it. And a couple years ago, I did some at track nitrous tuning with him. His name's Dave. And he's only running a small system, but he in a lot of bracket racing classes, they'll have what they call a quick door or quick dragster class. And what they'll do is, instead of going in the Super Pro class, and there's 150, 200 cars, you could also enter in a quick door class, which they would only take the 16 fastest cars and then have a second bracket race there. So you give you 2 chances for winning. Also, you get 2 chances of practice, and you're leaving the starting line working the Christmas tree twice as many times, so it just sharpens your skills. So for this guy Dave's Camaro, he just needed a couple tenths quicker to make sure he would make the door car show, the quick door show, whenever he went to a race. So we set up a nitrous system on it. And anybody that is familiar with the SB2, which is a NASCAR engine, it's got a very short angle on the valve train. It's kind of more almost like an LS engine, as far as the degrees the intake valve, the valve stems are on the combustion to the combustion chamber, or to the squareness of the crank. So a standard small block, the valves are at 23 degrees. That's why you'll hear people call it a 23-degree engine. And then, like on LS, they're 12, and I think on the SB2 they're like 11 or 10. And so what happens is, as you stand the valve up, as the valve gets closer to 0, which means it would be perpendicular to the connecting rod, your combustion chamber size can be made much smaller, because now you don't have the valves coming in at an odd angle. So obviously the 23 degree, there's a big pocket, a big dome in the combustion chamber, that if you want high compression, you have to put a dome and a piston to fill it. So the one bad problem is, as you make that combustion chamber smaller and less of a dome, you are less of a chamber, your piston then becomes flat and still will make high compression. And when you have a motor running on nitrous has a very fast burn. So the larger the deck surface on the cylinder head is, and you have a flat top piston, what ends up happening is you get a very small quench area where the flame needs to travel to burn all the fuel and air in the combustion chamber. When you have that great big pocket in there, you have very little quench area, so it burns very cleanly. If you've ever taken a head off an engine and looked at the combustion chamber before you clean it, you always see that the combustion chamber itself will be dark with soot and fuel byproducts and stuff. And a lot of times the flat up on the top half of the combustion chamber, where it's the big flat area, you'll see you could almost wipe it with a rag and it's like still brand new clean. And the reason is the flame has not traveled across there because of the quench area. So reason I mentioned all that is when you're tuning nitrous on a motor like an SB2, timing is very critical, because you don't have a big window, you don't have a good quench burning on that cylinder, because there's so much flat deck with a flat piston coming up to it. So it's not very advantageous to put nitrous on a combination like that. But we did it on his just so he could get into that class. We ended up only having to spray it with a 175 shot. And so he's been racing the car. I really haven't heard from him in a while. And I get a phone call, and I don't have pictures of his spark plug, but he's like, dude, I pulled my spark plugs out after 20 runs, and they're eroding away. And, he was kind of wondering why that was, and they were very wet, black and wet. So we got into a discussion and told him, he needs to start doing some maintenance, or not so much maintenance, but start keeping better records of his engine. So that kind of leads me to our tech section tonight. So what we do on the race cars, and I'll go ahead and pop some pictures up here. Okay, so what we do on the race cars is, and I really should do it to all engines, really. Once they've been ran a couple heat cycles, and you've got the rings should be seated in by 2 or 3 heat cycles, hot to cold. You should do a compression test and a leak down test. So here's your typical compression test kit. Comes with a bunch of different spark plug adapters, and like this long one here is for some of the Ford Coyote and mod motors, because the spark plugs are way down inside the cylinder head, your Hemis and stuff like that. So there's another tool. This one actually you have it as rubber pieces. I wouldn't use those. You got to kind of hold them in a kind of Mickey Mouse to try to get an accurate reading. But what you want to do is you want to pull all your spark plugs out, open the throttle blade, turn off your fuel system, and crank the engine and get a compression reading. I usually like to, when you can hear the needle, you can see the needle move, and you can kind of hear it pumping. I like to go to 10 pumps, and then I jot those numbers down. And the other thing I like to do is I like to read the very first pump. So on your needle, you'll see it jump up, and usually you'll see it go anywhere from 60 to 100 on the first stroke. And then it'll pump, 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 and it'll end up, depending on what your compression ratio is and stuff like that, anywhere from 150 to a 200, 250 on a really high compression motor. Really about 210, 220 is about the highest you normally see. But anyway, so now you've got a good reading. So that first pump is kind of giving you an indication of how much seal you have. And then as it continues pumping, the rings will get loaded, and the valves will now have pressure against them, and they'll kind of seal up and come to a max compression, if you will. Now that's not compression ratio, this is a dynamic cylinder compression. And you jot those numbers down, and that's just a reference. So then if you really want to get good records of what your engine is doing, you would use a tool like this. Now this is a leak down tester. So what you would do here is put your hose in your spark plug cylinder, in the cylinder. So again, all the spark plugs out, throttle open. You put this tool in number 1, put your thumb over the connector, rotate the engine. You can do it by starter, but it's much easier if you can get a ratchet on the front of the engine and rotate it. And as you get close to TDC, well, it'll start getting air about 60 degrees before TDC. But as you come up to TDC, you'll feel air pushing your thumb off the hose. So get to TDC, and then you hook this gauge up. And so you hook shop air to it, and you regulate it to, say, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, wherever you want to set it. And then you'll see this gauge with the hose disconnected should be at 0. You connect it to the cylinder, and then it'll start blowing air into the cylinder, and then it'll show leakage. And this will tell you how much cylinder leak you have in the engine. So you do this to all 8 cylinders, jot those notes down when the engine's fresh, and now you have a good baseline of where the engine should be. So then down the road, you can do this again. This is just some other tools. This is an OTC one. On the Grudge car, we use this one. This is a Moroso one. But they all do the same thing. They all have a knob on there so you can adjust 0. And this is actually the one I have. I have a snap-on. And once you do that, that's going to give you an indication of where your engine is. So I'm talking to Dave, and he's like, you know, I got oil in the cylinder. I'm like, well, you need to do a leak down. And he did not know what a leak down gauge was. So we talked about it, just like we're talking about it now here. And so now, unfortunately, he didn't do it when the engine was fresh. So now he's going to do it, and just wherever the numbers are, he doesn't know whether they're good or bad. But like I told him, on a nitrous engine, let's step back. So a typical NA engine with nice tight ring gaps, stock engine, you're going to see leakage anywhere from 6 to 10. You're always going to have a little bit of leak because there's gaps on the rings. So you know you have to have that, because as the heat grows in the engine, the rings will get tighter and smaller. So obviously, if you do leak down hot, it'll be less leakage than when you do cold. But it's easier to do cold because now the headers or manifolds are cold, and all you're looking for is a baseline anyway. But anyway, on a supercharged engine or any boosted engine, so nitrous, turbo, supercharger, you run a much larger ring gap because the rings will see much more heat from the combustion chamber process. So they're going to show a lot more leakage. But again, if you can keep the leakage between, say, 10 and 20, that's not a bad baseline to start with. You know, you have your information, and you can go from there. A little caveat is Total Seal does make a ring, a secondary ring that's machined, and they use an oil scraper, and you put it opposite of the ring gap, and that way theoretically you have a complete sealed second ring. That will show less leakage on your cylinder leak detector. Whether it's really any better or not, that's still out for discussion. But that's what you do this, and you then have a baseline on the engine. Now, a street engine, it may not be that critical to do that, but if you're going to run any power adders, it becomes more important to do this, because now you have a good understanding of the condition of the sealing of the cylinder for combustion. Now, I told Dave, because his motor is showing oil on the spark plugs, he's probably going to see more like in the 30s to 50s, even in the 60s range. Now, you can still have a decent running engine with that much leakage, but that's when you're going to see blow-by coming out the breathers. You know, when I've seen cars before where you can pull the breather off and then you can actually see it pumping. where one cylinder has got a problem, and you actually see the smoke puffing out the valve cover, boop, 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 boop. And, if you do a leak down, you'll find which one it is very quickly. And then what you do for diagnostic purposes, like I was explaining to Dave, I said, now what you're going to do is you're going to leak each cylinder, just like we discussed. Oh, I should have prefaced it. So when you find TDC number 1 and you leak that cylinder, look at your firing order, the firing order of your engine. Take your balancer diameter and divide it by 360, and then that'll tell you how much gap is in between each increment. So whatever that is, times it by 90, and then that will tell you like 2.5 inches or 3.25 inches. So you can take tape and go whatever that number is, just let's say 3.25 inches. So you go to 3.25 inches and put a hash line, and then from the 90, that would be 90 degrees, or actually it'd be 270, and then go 90 again. That's going to put you at 180, and then 90 again, that'll put you at 90, and then 90 again will put you back at TDC. So then what you do then is rotate the engine, the direction of rotation, and when you move 90 degrees, that would be the next cylinder in your firing order at 270. So on a Chevy, 1 would be at TDC. You rotate the motor 90 degrees, that would give you 8. Rotate the motor, and it's at 270. Then you rotate the motor to 180 degrees, which would be the 3rd mark. And that would be, on a standard Chevy firing order, would be cylinder 4. And you go to 90 degrees, which would be your 3rd mark. That would be cylinder 3. Then you go back to TDC, and that's cylinder 6. And then 5, 7, 2. So you rotate that, and that way you find TDC on every spot. Makes it very easy to do the leak down. So once you have all that stuff done, if you have a degree, your harmonic bouncer has all the degrees on it, much easier. You don't all you just mark it at each spot. But what you do then, like I was telling Dave, is now you put the motor on number 1, put the leak in there, see where the leak is. If it's more than 30%, then what you do is you listen in the carburetor throat, because you've already got the throttle body open. So you listen in the barrels of the carburetor. See if you hear air leaking. If you do, you have an intake valve that's not seated completely. If you don't, good, intake valve is sealed. Then you go to your exhaust system. If you got duals, it makes it even easier, because now you can just listen to the right bank or left bank. But again, you listen to the exhaust and see if you hear air rushing into it. If you do, you have an exhaust valve or seat issue. If you don't, good, the exhaust valve is sealing. And then you listen to the crankcase. So take a breather out or your PCV valve out and listen into the valve cover. And if you hear air rushing into the motor, you know you have rings that are not sealing anymore. And then you just do that for every cylinder. And this is a very standard technique that mechanics use all the time. We get a car in the shop and it's got issues, and we're trying to do a quick diagnostics to it so that we know what we can start a conversation with the customer knowing, well, here's what we found so far. Now we know that, let's just say cylinders 8 and 4 have leakage, and we hear it coming out of the crankcase. Well, now we know that the motor has to be tore down, and we want to look at everything, but we want to look at 8 and 4 even more closely than the other ones, because that's where we hear the most amount of leakage. So really good diagnostic tool, and it's really good for record keeping on a race engine, because now you have something to go back to and you can check how the engine's performing. So like I don't know, maybe I didn't show you guys. I may have had on me the whole time. I'm sorry. Let's just go back through the pictures real quick. Sorry about that. So there's a standard compression tester, your adapters for different spark plug depths and sizes, and tool for your Hemi motors. This was the one I was telling you about with the rubber tips. Not a very good design because you have to hold it into the cylinder hard so that you can get a good reading. And this is a leak down tester, and you can use your adjustment knob there to get this to read 0, and then you kind of click it on the hose a couple of times to make sure it's dead heads on 0. There's another. This is an OTC style. Again, with a couple attachments. This is the one that we use on the Smurf. We have this Moroso one, and this one's a little bit easier. It only has one dial, so again, when you hook air to it, shop air on the input, the needle will swing to near 0. You adjust this regulator till it gets to 0. Pop your hose in and out of it a couple times to make sure it stays on 0, and you're good to go. And this is the one that I personally have, same as the Moroso style. You got your 0 to 100, you got your adjustment knob, and you got your attachments there. So, sorry about that. I thought I had switched screens. So, good record keeping, gives you good information. What'll happen specifically on, especially on nitrous, but even on turbo and supercharged engines, you're raising the cylinder pressure so high, and especially with nitrous, there's so much heat in the combustion process that they'll actually take the tension out of the rings. So what I was getting at was going back to last weekend, or the week before that, when I was helping Kenny Hubbard with his daughter's nitrous car. I was in charge of that car, and we had 2 cylinders that had about 45% leakage. Now, is that bad? Absolutely. Would we probably made some more power if we had freshened the engine? Absolutely. However, we were qualified number 3 with the car as it was. So what my role was at that point was, after every run down the track, we read all the leakage, and if the leakage was getting worse, then we would make the decision to put new pistons and rings in the car. But it actually stayed exactly the same, or sometimes even read a little better. So we're able to leave it alone. The car still ran in the 450s. We're number 3 qualifier. And, no sense, doing a 4 to 5 hour tear down and rebuild. The motor would probably only pick up a little bit of horsepower. Most of the cylinders were in the 30s, so which was about where the motor started at, fresh from the engine builder. So we probably weren't going to pick up a whole lot to do for the amount of work it would taken to do that. So that's the reason why you want to do this record keeping, because now you can kind of control what's going on. So we knew after every run, hey, we did a leakage. Everything stayed pretty good the same. We only had 2 cylinders that were kind of out of the range. So as long as they didn't get any worse, we're good to go. We'll keep running the engine the way it is. No harm, no foul, and be able to re-ring it after the race, after the event. So that's kind of why this is an important thing. Something I should have been doing more often on the Smurf, and which now it will become a normal thing now. Every morning we're going to go ahead and leak that car so we know what's going on, as long as time permitted. So just better maintenance, better control. Catch things before it becomes catastrophic. That's the main thrust of this. But for you guys, this is a really good tool if you're purchasing a car and you want to know what kind of condition the engine is in. Obviously, you won't know what the start point was, but you kind of know, rule of thumb, if it's a NA engine, it should have less than 20% leakage. unless it's super high mileage or whatever. But at least that's going to give you an indication of what's going on. And like I said, by listening in the carburetor, listening to the exhaust, listening into the crankcase, if the leakage is high, you'll know where it's coming from. If it's rings, it is what it is. But if you have one cylinder, say the engine's at like 10 to 20 everywhere, and one engine's got 40, and you hear air coming out of the intake, well, the car's got a burnt intake valve. So right away, hey, I'm going to have to pull these heads and have a valve job done at minimum, maybe replace a valve or a seat. So it kind of gives you a good indication of where you're going to be with that car and expenses if you're purchasing a car. So that's just a good thing to do. These leak down testers are fairly cheap. You can get them around $100. Obviously, that Moroso one's a high dollar unit, but another thing you can do for checking, we don't really need to do this much in racing, drag racing, but as far as purchasing a car or having a car, you're trying to do some diagnostics on the condition of the engine, is you can get a chemical tester. And these chemical testers come with different kits and a solution. Here's a good one. So you get this blue combustion leak fluid. You take this and you fill each of these tubes up to this calibrated line, and you lower the coolant in the radiator because you don't want to draw coolant into this. So you lower the coolant down maybe 2-3 inches in the radiator, just bleed off a little bit through the petcock, and then you can test you pump the bulb on the top up here, and if the fluid stays blue, good. Then what you do is you go ahead and start the engine and let it run, let it warm up. And again, you want to make sure that the fluid, the coolant isn't getting anywhere near this inlet of this tester. But then you start pumping it again. And as long as the fluid stays blue, there is no coolant getting into the combustion chamber, or no combustion chamber gases getting into the coolant. Let me rephrase that. If you can see in this picture here. Let me blow it up here a little bit. The guy filled the calibration tube to the line. It was blue. He ran it, and it turned to a goldish yellow or green, depending on which system you're testing. As long as you didn't, which you can tell by where the fluid level is, as long as it didn't get any coolant in there, that is telling you there's combustion pressure gases getting into the cooling system, which means you probably have a head gasket issue, a warped head, a head gasket that's eroded, but what it's doing is it's allowing the combustion pressures, because the combustion pressures obviously are over 150 psi on a good running engine. It has to be over 90 for a cylinder to even fire. So your cooling system is only at 15 psi. So obviously you're not going to get coolant going into the combustion chamber during the engine running, but you will get gases going into the radiator. And also, if it's bad enough, you can actually see bubbles in the cooling system while it's running. But that's a pretty blatant leak at that point. But again, this is a test that you can get these testers relatively cheap. I think this tester here is like $20, and that solution in that tube will allow you to test probably 30 or 40 tests. So plenty of fluid to test. If you're buying, selling cars or anything like that, a good thing to test, because you'll know right away if you're going to have a cooling system issue. So I just wanted to, another thing you can do to see the wellness of your engine, just besides firing it up, listening to hear obviously noises, or if you see smoke out the tailpipes. But now we're getting into a lot more in-depth diagnostics of how good this engine really is. And the last thing I want to show is an oil test. So you can buy these. You can Google it on the internet, oil particle test, or they're under a couple different names. But you can buy these tests, oil samples, and you fill this little vial up with engine oil, dirty engine oil, and then you put it in this container and you ship it off, and then they send you back in a couple days a report. So here's another one. You kind of fill out the information, what you want to know. Thought I had another slide. Let me look, see what's going on here. Nope, I don't see it. So anyway, so what these do is you send these off to a laboratory, and they break down the oil to all the particulates, and you can get Babbitt, copper, iron, bronze, any of your different materials that could be wearing inside the engine will be in the oil, even though the oil doesn't look that bad. But again, this is just something you could do, especially if you're buying, say you're going out and you're buying $100,000 restoration car, and you don't want to spend that kind of money, 200,000, and find out when you get the car home 3 weeks later that the engine has huge problems. This happens a lot. So you could do, what I would do at that point is tell the vehicle owner, hey, I'm good. I'm interested in your car, but I'd like to run a couple tests before we get it because of the amount of money you have. And he's going to end up learning something too. Especially a lot of times the car owner really doesn't have, he's not a mechanic typically, so he might not know what any of that information was if you were to ask him. So you could do a compression test that'll give you a really good indication if all the cylinders are within 10% of each other. You might want to stop there and say, well, let's just take the oil, a little sample of the oil and send it off, and in 3 days, if that passes, we're good. I'll buy the car. You could do the coolant test. Again, none of these things are going to be detrimental to the car for doing the test, but it would definitely help you or your friends out that are maybe purchasing a car from buying something that has a hidden issue. So that's kind of my tech tips for tonight. You guys have any questions on any of that stuff, feel free to email me or leave them in the comments. Hopefully the comment board is still working. I see Mike posted somewhere. Didn't Moroso used to make a nice tape for the balancer? Yes. Right, Mike. Very good. So if you measure your harmonic balancer for doing for putting a degree wheel tape on there, you can say you measure your balancer and it's 7.5 inches in diameter. You can Google harmonic balancer tape for 7.5 balancer. Moroso makes tapes, but now with Amazon, a gazillion companies make these tapes. And all you do is just wipe all the grease off. You line up 0 with your timing, your 0 mark or your TDC mark on your balancer, and this tape will go all the way around the balancer, and it'll give you a lot of degrees at like 60 to TDC advanced, but it'll give you your 270, your 90, 180, and 90, so that you can do your leak down test on the balancer. So you can buy those tapes for pennies. I think last time I looked, they were I believe they were like $4, and you get 3 rolls of tape, 3 tapes. But yeah, so obviously for your common size balancer, you can get a tape, but you can also do the math, take the 7.5, go to a calculator to get the diameter versus circumference. Good. It seems like the chat's working, as Ryan just was on. I only see my own chat much like every day. Yeah, there's a few up there, but I think it's working because you just popped up. So hopefully everybody's seeing that. Yeah, so if you have an oddball size balancer, which sometimes some of the aftermarket balancers are odd, and you might not be able to get a tape for that. So then you take the diameter and put it into a calculator to get circumference. And like I said earlier, you take the circumference divided by 360, because there's 360 degrees, and that will tell you how much space is in between each increment. And for doing a leak down test, you just need every 90 degrees, then you just multiply that increment by 90, and that'll come up with a certain number. I think I did a 3 1/4 inch balance, a 7 1/4 inch balancer, and I think it was 3 3/8 was 90 degrees. So you just take a cloth tape, or you could take masking tape and mark it out on the roll, and then take it off and tape it to the balancer. So there's multiple ways you can cheat it up. Once you do that, you could center punch the balancer if you wanted to make a lasting mark on it, and you could put paint in it or something like that. So there's a bunch of different things you can do. But these are just tools that my buddy Dave, who has a race car, didn't even know they were existing, that you could find those information out. So I thought it'd be a good thing, a good topic tonight to discuss. It's good information. Like I said, if you're going to buy a car, or you have a friend's car that's not running right, you want to help him out and try to figure out what's wrong with it, these are a couple quick tools to help you figure out what's going on with that motor. And then from there, you would know whether you need to do farther investigation by tearing the motor down, or you find everything's in fine working order, and you might just have a bad plug or a bad plug wire or something. If the engine is all mechanically sound and you still have a misfire or something, well, then you know to look for something else. So just a good bit of information there. Hopefully you guys can find it useful, and we can go from there. So I think that's all I have for tonight. Seems like the stream worked well tonight. I see on my drop frames it says only 3.5% out of the entire show, so that seems to be pretty good. So we'll roll with it. I'll take a look at this later, make sure everything was good, and somebody just texted me, but it looks like it's not pertaining to the show, so that's good. So anyway, so I guess with that said, we'll call it a night. Again, I want to reiterate, if you guys ever need anything as far as specialty tools, I definitely I don't use them every day, so I got no problem taking a deposit and sending them off to you so you can use them. And go from there. I got that fender roller. I got that wheelwright tool. Those are two that, you really wouldn't want to buy. But obviously compression tester or even leak down tester you can probably rent from your local parts store. You can get the combustion chamber tester at your local parts store. The only oddball thing would be the oil analysis kit, but you can Google that on the internet, and there's a handful of companies that will do that. They'll send you the kit, and then you just UPS the box back to them with your oil in it, and they'll do the sample. And like I said, most of those companies will email you the report within a day or two. They're pretty good about that. We had some road race cars back in the day that we would do that sample about every 2 races just to verify that nothing's coming apart in the engine. They were little import engines, and we wouldn't see anything in the leak down as far as cylinders for compression and stuff like that. But that also gives you bearing indication of what the bearings are doing and stuff like that. So when you're running a stock engine in some of these lower forms of road racing, where you can't really put anything high performance in it, you got to basically run a stock engine. it's kind of sometimes a little scary, that what you could either do an oil sample or you could cut your filters apart all the time and check them out. So just different ways of doing it, whatever makes it easy for you and stuff like that. So appreciate everybody being on the show. Looks like we had about 55 people pop in and out tonight, so that's a good amount of numbers. And just remember, click the like to help the algorithm, and you're not subscribed, subscribe. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything, and you're not going to get any trash mail or anything from YouTube if you subscribe. If you don't have an account, go ahead and set up a YouTube account, so that way you can find save all your favorite creators and go back to and watch those over again, stuff like that. Little update on t-shirts. I should be getting the first batch in by the weekend, so I'll show you guys that next week. And again, you guys on the chat, you guys are my normal viewers. Email me your shirt sizes, and I'll get you guys a shirt. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and pull the plug on tonight, and hope everybody has a good week, and we'll see everybody next Tuesday. All right? Sweet. So see you all later.